Καλησπέρα και πάλι. Καλώς ήρθατε ξανά στο Brand Purpose Conference, το συνέδριο για το Brand Purpose που διοργανώνει η Μπούσιας και το περιοδικό Marketing Week. Στην πρώτη ενότητα είδαμε πρακτικές και στρατηγικές από διεθνείς ομιλητές. Θα συνεχίσουμε, θα παραμείνουμε στο εξωτερικό, αλλά με έναν ομιλητή ελληνικής καταγωγής, ο οποίος θα μας δώσει και τη δική του άποψη για το θέμα, παρομοιάζοντας μάλιστα τη σχέση ανάμεσα στα brands και στους καταναλωτές με ένα ραντεβού, με ένα speed dating. Πριν από αυτό θα ήθελα να σας υπενθυμίσω ότι μέσω του chat που βλέπετε στην πλατφόρμα του συνεδρίου μπορείτε να επικοινωνείτε μαζί μας και να απευθύνετε τις ερωτήσεις σας προς τους ομιλητές. Εμείς τις μεταφέρουμε σε αυτούς αμέσως μετά την παρουσίασή τους κατά τη διάρκεια του Q&A. Οπότε έχουμε ήδη τον Eugene να μας περιμένει στο Λονδίνο και να μας μιλήσει για το πώς τα brands σχετίζονται με τους καταναλωτές και πώς το purpose μπαίνει σε όλη αυτή την σχέση ως παράγοντας που την κάνει πιο δυνατή, ελπίζουμε. Καλησπέρα.
Καλησπέρα, Βασίλικη. Τι κάνετε?
Πολύ καλά. Εσείς που δίνουμε το λόγο, νομίζω θα γίνει στα αγγλικά όμως η παρουσίασή σου, σωστά?
Θα το κάνω στο Greeklish, αλλά ναι, και στα δύο θα δούμε πώς θα πάμε.
Okay.
Είμαι πολύ ευχαριστημένος να γυρίζω φέτος μαζί σας, να είμαι κοντά σας. Ελπίζω να είστε καλά, καλό μήνα, για αυτούς που νηστεύετε, καλή νηστεία. Έχετε ακούσει πάρα πολύ ενδιαφέρον πράγματα σήμερα το πρωί. Θέλω να σας δώσω μια άποψη που είναι λίγο πιο πρακτική. Θα μπούμε κατευθείαν στο θέμα, όπως είπε και η Βασιλική, θέμα speed dating. Και συγγνώμη να σας βγάλω από εδώ. Και μπαίνουμε κατευθείαν. Για αυτούς που δεν ξέρετε, shag, marry and kill είναι, ας πούμε, μια άποψη που έχουμε όταν μπαίνουμε στο dating scene ή, ας πούμε, βγαίνουμε για παρέα ή βγαίνουμε να βρούμε κάποιον που είναι λίγο πιο σημαντικός, θα γίνει, ας πούμε, πιο σημαντικός στη ζωή μας ή ελπίζουμε ότι άμα τα πράγματα δεν πάνε και τόσο καλά, πρέπει γρήγορα και εύκολα να τον βγάλουμε αυτόν τον άνθρωπο από τη ζωή μας. Με αυτή την άποψη, το shag, marry, kill, η ιδέα έχει έρθει με την έννοια να καταλάβουμε πώς κάνουν οι καταναλωτές μια επαφή και μια σχέση με τα brands. Όλο το πρωί ακούγατε από την brand άποψη, τι θέλουν τα brands να κάνουν, τι θέλουν brands να αλλάξουν, τι μπορούν να αλλάξουν. Εγώ θα σας δώσω την άποψη από τον καταναλωτή, από το consumer. Άμα πάμε κατευθείαν στο θέμα γρήγορα, θα σας πω μια μεγάλη αλήθεια που συνήθως δεν θέλουμε να την ξέρουμε ή να την ακούμε. Θα σας πω τι θέλουν οι καταναλωτές, ποιο είναι το δικό τους το μυστικό. Θα παίξουμε λίγο ένα game shag, marry, kill και θα σας δείξω πώς μπορείτε να περάσετε από αυτό το ναρκοέποδο, ας πούμε. What is this ugly dating truth? We have come to listen and we come to hear and understand, from the press, from brands themselves, that consumers expect brands and industries to be good, responsible, moral, to have a conscience, to be sustainable, all of these lovely buzzwords. And if you look at some of the research that's been done, this is from Harvard Business Review earlier this year, about 50,000 consumers, they said, 65% of consumers are interested in buying purpose-driven brands. So we'll ignore for a moment that about a third don't care at all, but of the 2/3 that do, that should be quite encouraging. Therefore, it would be quite logical and natural for us to assume that if that many consumers are looking for purpose-driven brands, they will obviously be buying them, and they will not, conversely, be buying brands that do not have this, good, responsible, moral positioning. In other words, these brands, these non-moral, non-responsible brands, should lose some share, some sales, some customers, and not just in the very, very long term, in the next few weeks, the next few months, the next few years. This is not correct. The same Harvard Business Review actually, when tracing what consumers were actually doing, found that only a quarter of them actually bought purpose-driven brands. So we have 25%, 35% in the beginning who didn't care at all, but we had another 50% who, when it came to acting on it, said, you know what, there's some other metric, there's something else I'm interested in. Yeah, purpose is nice to have, but it didn't really influence that purpose-driven decision-making process. The problem is not the consumer. The problem is actually what we expect or we understand from the word purpose. Now, normally, if you talk to a normal consumer, a normal human being, if you mention the word purpose, somehow in that definition, you'll come out with, let's say, a bucket of causes, right? So what is a purpose? A life purpose, a government's purpose, a brand's purpose? It's things around equality. I think last year and the year before that, we've seen quite a lot around gender and around race. There's also about age equality. There's also about, animal equality. You've seen in certain countries things around gun violence. There's brands, there's efforts, there's NGOs that are fighting gun violence. You also look at things that are called gaps. It could be income gaps between the wealth and the poor. Obviously, the hunger famine issues that we have, hunger gaps between those who have and those who have not. Healthcare gaps, especially with COVID rampaging still through very many countries. And then, of course, we have the more, let's say, PR-friendly ones, the ones that get probably 80-90% of the share of voice, which is all about, sustainability and climate change, Greta Thunberg, and all the rest of them. There are also a few other causes which sort of fall down the wayside, but they still exist. Things around education, things around enlightenment, sort of self-improvement, happiness even. We're seeing this new well-being movement. And of course, maybe fixing a big wrong. We've seen from all these other gaps, from these inequalities, that there are things that are wrong with our society, and there are efforts to fix very specific issues. Now, brand purpose is something completely different. Brand purpose can only be a commercial purpose. A brand exists to sell a product, to sell a service, and its purpose is to sell that product, service as much as possible and make as much money as possible. That's because it's a brand purpose, it's not a purpose. So we need to be very clear. All brands have a purpose. It's a commercial purpose. But only some real purposes, some real causes, like I mentioned, can actually be fulfilled through brands, something which several of my previous speakers have mentioned. So what do consumers actually really want? Let's get really into their skin. They need your product or service to deliver on the brand promise. What is a brand promise? I pay for something, I get what you said you would do. You will clean my floors, you will fly me from point A from point B. That is the brand promise. They're also looking for a brand or product that has a decent equity. Equity, now, of course, I don't want to get into the huge, pieces around, what makes up equity, but let's just say it's the overall impression of what the brand represents. When someone buys a product, buys a service, they obviously don't want to feel bad about it. So as long as that brand, product, service has a good, relatively, let's say, good image, makes people relatively feel good for buying that purchase, everything's okay. But there's also one key ingredient that's still missing from this. I would give you guys a moment to vote, but in the interest of time, this is the same attribute that people look for when they date. If I give you 10 seconds maybe to think about what is the number one attribute you look for when you're dating, or if you're already married, when you were dating, what do you think that one main attribute is? I don't know how many mathematicians are in the room or ex-mathematicians, but this is the symbol for congruence. What is congruence or congruency? Congruency is about being honest, being transparent, being authentic. When someone says that you're a congruent person or the idea is congruent, it means all the points line up. There's nothing mismatched. There's nothing that makes you think two conflicting or opposing thoughts, because everything feels correct. Everything is correct. Brand congruency, if we transfer this now into our world, into our speak, into marketing, is actually about delivering that brand promise that we spoke about and doing it repeatedly. So I don't buy a product, this time it works, next time it didn't, the next time, I had to flip a coin to see if it would work or if it didn't work. It is consistent in delivering that brand promise, the reason why the brand exists, the product, the service. In other words, congruency is that product and brand and benefit delivered. Let's take a fictitious example. We'll have a line of sneakers. So this brand, Zeekr, is the Zara of sneakers, right? They have the latest trends, the latest fashions. They get it out really quickly. It's all sort of very accessible and amazing, even, let's say, cheap price. That is their brand promise. The latest sneaker fashions at the cheapest price, delivered extremely quickly to the market. And they have, let's say, a significant following of consumers in this market. Well, let's say that one day you find out in the press that all their shoes are made by 7-year-old orphans in developing countries, most of whom work 20 hours a day, and more than half of them never grow up to see their 18th birthday. That is an extremely horrible thing to find out about a brand that you like buying products from, isn't it? Does it have an impact, given what the brand's promise is? The brand's promise is latest fashion, very cheap. Sure, this is a very bad thing for any brand to have in an equity. You know, if you go back to the equity image, yeah, okay, you might not feel so comfortable buying it. But let's reference again the Harvard Business Review research. A quarter of you won't care either way. And another 40% of you, when it really comes down to putting your money where your mouth is, will say, you know, maybe it's just, you know, competitive bad PR. You know, maybe someone's trying to trick me because the brand's actually okay, and this is, you know, just normal competitive marketing bullshit. And you'll continue buying it. A fourth of you might say, you know what, I'll pay a little bit extra and go and buy a trainer or a sneaker that hopefully isn't made by children. All in all, Zeekr will survive and nothing much will probably happen to it. But let's turn the tables on them. What if the brand you found out was doing this was Nike, as indeed it was in the mid and early 1990s? For a brand which talks about sports, athleticism, improving yourself, empowering yourself, and now the last few years they also have a very, very strong youth empowerment platform, this would probably be incongruent with what they're saying and what they're doing, at least publicly, and in a very big PR fashion, versus what it seems their back supply chain happens to be doing. And when they did do this in the early 1990s, when they were irresponsible or when they were intentionally blind, they suffered. Their sales suffered. Their brand image suffered. Consumers stopped buying Nike. Consumers started boycotting Nike. Legislation was passed against Nike or against the industry to sort of try and ensure that these things wouldn't happen. So this is what happens when what a brand says and what it does becomes incongruent with what the brand promises. In Zeekr's point, if you want cheap shoes, well, guess what? Somewhere, you know, the cheapness has to be sourced from somewhere. Somewhere it has to be made cheaply. But if you're a brand that isn't even talking about the product, Nike never talks about shoes, never talks about fashion, never talks about clothing. They talk about a much higher ideal, about sportsmanship, athleticism, you know, improving yourself. This is something which has to be held holy, which is something that has to be kept sacred. And these two things just won't match. So what consumers, at the end of the day, what they're really looking for, as I said, is this congruency. They want brands to be congruent. And the reason is it helps them make a choice. It helps them make a quick choice. They don't want to be standing in front of a shelf or online on your store and whatever and trying to decide, is everything you've said and done matching with what you're delivering versus the promise versus the equity? If the easier you can make that chain of thinking for them, the more likely they are to engage with you. And there will be consumers that will engage with all kinds of brands, whether they have a purpose or not. But the point is, are you delivering on your brand promise in an equitable way and in a way which matches what you're saying and what you're doing? Remember, consumers need to know that you can deliver on the brand promise. So even in Nike's point, from Nike's point of view, yes, they have an ethereal, higher, idealized and more moralistic purpose, but they still make very, very good sneakers. No one would buy Nike if the moment you walked out of the stores, the sneakers disintegrated. So everything else is extra, is good, is potentially helpful, but you still need to deliver on the brand purpose. So now let's delve into one extra little secret that consumers have. So yes, we know that they're looking for brand congruency, but there's something else as well. When consumers choose brands, whatever the industry, whatever the sector, it very much is like dating. My background is in anthropology and social psychology, and I have to say that there are very, very many parallels with how consumers choose brands to how they choose their partners. And they sort of fall into these three overall buckets. So as we said, shag, marry, and kill. Now, already we're off to a good start because in 2/3 of the cases, there's some level of interaction that a brand will have with you. It'll engage with you in a transactional way or engage with you in a more longer term way, let's say. You'll have to do something that's really, really, really off the charts bad for them to completely dismiss and unenvelop you. let's dive into each of these very quickly. What is a brand that, let's say, it's shaggable, a shag brand? As we said, there will be an element of transactionalism to it, right? So consumers will see you, they'll buy you this time, they might not buy you next time. They might buy you when you're on promotion, or they might buy you because you've done some interesting design partnership with someone. They're not strictly loyal, but they still see worth in your deliverance of your brand promise. You still deliver something that they want and that they need, and they're happy on the occasion when the right circumstances are there for them to engage with you. It's your one-night stand coming and going. Now, marriage brands or marriage relationships with brands, this is when a consumer will make a more actively thought out consideration for you and buy you. It doesn't mean that they're buying you all the time or they're buying you more. Again, within loyalty terms, they might be slightly more loyal to you, or the strength of that loyalty might be stronger towards you than versus other brands that are also offering the same products and services. But they realize that by purchasing you, they're getting something more. It's not the one-night stand. It's not hit it and quit it and off we go. And then, of course, we have brands or products that are launched by brands which they've completely lost the plot. They are either not delivering on the brand purpose anymore, or they've shifted and they're not doing it as well anymore. Their equity has started to deteriorate, either because of them or because of the changing environment. Consumers, when they see a brand in this category, just like when you see a potential partner out in a club or in a restaurant, or with your dating friends, these are the type of people that immediately see there's something off, there's something wrong, and you don't want to risk engaging with them, or that you shouldn't engage with them. Now, I've been going on about promise and equity, and if we look through our three types of brand profiles, you'll see obviously that both shaggable brands and marriage material brands, they do deliver on the promise, and they do overall have good equities. Brands that you would want to kill off, or products within brands that you'd want to kill off, obviously have one or neither of these. But this is where, let's say, the more purpose ideal or the causal ideal also comes into it. While before we've been talking about commerce, from the cause point of view, you have your marriage brands which tick all the boxes, and by tick all the boxes I mean, yes, they have a cause, a real world cause, not a I need to make more money cause. And that cause, again, might be about a gap, it might be an inequality, it might be about fixing some very, very dire problem, even from a consumer point of view. But then they also have an organizational structure that supports this, that galvanizes everyone into the right direction. And they're also responsible about what they do. So going back to the Nike example, although for a few years they tried to dodge and avoid the controversies around the supply chain, they eventually restructured their company, restructured their employees, regalvanized themselves, and took responsibility for their entire manufacturing process. And that contributed to their overall higher brand purpose. Now, from the shaggable brand's point of view, there may or may not be a cause. Some brands, as you've been hearing this morning, might be in some form of transition or might wish to have a cause, but they don't exactly know how to, what's the best fit for themselves. They might also be taking, the easiest first step would be to take more responsibility about what they produce. So, okay, fine, we're not going to go out and save the whales, but at least we can try and reduce our plastic footprint, our carbon footprint. We can try to reduce the amount of energy we use when we produce things. So there is an element of maybe increased awareness around responsibility. The thing is, most of these brands, they might do, let's say, these small band-aid attempts to become responsible, but they usually do not seismically shift their organizational structure. And that is why they will probably never make the transition into a more marriage-type brand, into more long-term loved, consumer-loved brand. And of course, as you can see on the complete right, the brands that are eligible to be disregarded and killed off, they don't do any of these, or they don't do any of these well enough to be worthy of consumer consideration. The shaggable brands will work from promise and equity and try and do everything else. Their core foundations are what do we do and how well do we do it and how do we look, whereas marriage brands start the other way around. What is it we're trying to change in society, in humanity, the problem in this industry? What is that problem we're trying to fix or we're trying to change? And then we build everything else around it. Now, as you can imagine, there is a spectrum even within these three. So you will have brands, shaggable brands, which start to approach the center, that start to approach a more marriage quality type of brand. And then you have everyone else, brands which are in transition maybe from shaggable to kill or even from marriage to kill, and those which, as we'll see in a few seconds in case studies, ones that are just completely out of it and shouldn't even exist anymore. So we've reached the point where I want to play this lovely game with you. Let's call it our speed dating clinic, and you guys are going to see some quite interesting examples about brands and where they fit or why they fit there. But my first question to you, and I don't know if Vasiliki can help me from the chat point of view, is of these three gentlemen, we have three Michalis. Who would you shag, who would you marry, and who would you kill? And don't feel bad if we have to kill any of them. For me, my personal lineup would probably be, unfortunately, would be Michalis Terzis for shagging, Michalis Violaris for marrying, and Hadjiyannis for killing. I love Hadjiyannis, but well, I had to make a choice, and I had to weight it better in terms of Terzis and Violaris instead. So, unfortunately, Hadjiyannis lost out. But let's take this back into the brand world. And let's look at the shave care category, something which, let's say, has not fared that well in Greece as a category historically. We Greeks, we do like to have the more unshaven look. We look good in it. But we'll look at three key brands which exist, not everywhere in the world, but let's take the US. We have Gillette, we have the Dollar Shave Club, and we have a new entrant that only launched about a month ago, again in the US, Planet Kind, which is actually a sub-brand by Gillette. Gillette has been around, as you all know, for years. At some point it had 80, 90, 95% market share in some countries. In the US, a good solid 70 to 80% market share, competing with Wilkinson and Schick. But what ended up happening is it became a very transactional brand. Yes, you were getting the shave. You were paying quite a lot for it. The equity started to suffer despite having, lovely brand icons like Roger Federer and Tiger Woods. But its success actually started to create a category level problem, a brand promise problem. And the brand promise was being violated in the sense of, it shouldn't really cost you $40, $50, $60 to buy 5 pieces of, plastic with some very, very tiny bits of steel, razors. And this created an opportunity for the Dollar Shave Club and other copycat brands like it. They addressed brand promise. They saw a fix the problem opportunity. So they found this purpose in fixing the problem being the entire category and how it was priced relative to the benefit the consumer was getting. And they said, you know what, you can get a very, very good shave, as good as Gillette, for $1. Or, for $5 if you subscribe, or for $10, okay, if you want something slightly more premium. And they created a link with a certain number of consumers, about 10 to 12% of the market, who bought into this purpose. They bought into this problem, and they recognized that the Dollar Shave Club was acting as a solution. Now, going back to what I said, there's a space for all brands. Some brands will stay as shaggable. Some brands will be marriage quality material. It's not that one is better than the other. You will find consumers who are happy with every single section of this pie. But there are also opportunities in this pie. And if we round out with Planet Kind, which is again, the latest offering by Gillette, on a product basis, it's Gillette sponsored. Yes, it's been made with sustainable materials in a sustainable way. The packaging and etc. is recyclable. But it does beg the question, one, from a brand promise point of view, if your entire emphasis is about recycling, sustainability, and all the rest of it, will you actually deliver a good shave? Because if not, okay, I might not like it, but I'll rather pay $50 for the actual traditional Gillette razor. Because yes, at the end of the day, while I want to save the planet and I want to reduce my footprint, I can't go into the office looking like a badger took their teeth to me. So it creates questions around the brand promise. From an equity point of view, yes, okay, it's a nice feel-good equity, but it's lost its way. It's lost its way, and it hasn't even started yet. That's the irony of it all. So I want to take you through some very, very quick case studies across our 3 types of dates. I'm going to speed through them very quickly because I just want to give you some ideas, and then we can get to them in Q&A. But if we look at some of our more shaggable brands now, Amazon is probably the ultimate shag brand. It's the #2 brand in the world by revenue. Obviously, last year, COVID definitely helped that and definitely helped Jeff Bezos. But their brand promise has always been about customer service and the variety of things that you can buy from them. We've gotten to the point where you can buy, I think, almost anything, maybe even cars, through the Amazon platform. You will get it within an hour if you're in the US and you're a Prime member, within 1 or 2 days, 3 days if you're anywhere else in the world. And if there's a problem, Amazon's customer service, post-purchase customer service, will solve it then and there in a web chat, in a phone call, in an email. They never leave any consumer unsatisfied. No matter, even if it was all the consumer's fault, they sent the product to the wrong address, they lost it, they opened it, and while opening it, they destroyed it. Amazon will fix that problem. And consumers see that brand promise, they like that brand promise, and they continue to use Amazon. Now, hasn't Amazon had a lot of bad press? We're looking at the equity side. Yeah, pretty much for the last 5 years, there's always been some problem, whether they're underpaying their employees and their workers, horrible working conditions. Last year with COVID, because obviously in these huge factories, you had to reduce the number of employees working in them for social distancing reasons. These workers ended up working 2, 3, 5, 10 times as hard because there were fewer of them having to do the same amount and actually even more work, right? Because we all ended up buying everything on Amazon last year. But it's a compromise that it seems about 300 million people globally are very, very happy to make. And 150 million of us are also Prime members, which means, if we have to make some poor worker rush around the factory at 20 miles an hour to find everything that I've bought and get it to me within the next hour by drone, I'm happy with that. I'm happy to pay an extra £7 a month for that. It makes no real difference. Let's look at IKEA, another interesting shag brand. Their purpose, going back, let's say, referring to our Zeekr example, is to deliver lovely design brands within the furniture space, within the home decoration space, at affordable prices, making everything affordable to the consumer. I don't know how many of you have Netflix and like watching documentaries. There's a lovely little episode in the documentary series called Broken on IKEA, which basically talks about how they're going around the world destroying virgin forests, so new wood forests. They've also had a few issues with their products. They don't ever seem to test some of their products. And in some cases in the US, you had these lovely, lovely, very tall wardrobes with small kids climbing up them, and the wardrobes would fall and crush and kill children. IKEA had to be pushed a lot to do a recall. And even then, when they did a recall, it was sort of buried in their website. It wasn't exactly an active, contact every consumer that's bought anything from us to see if we need to do something about it. But you know what? Last year, 2020, was their second best year ever. I think they brought in about $40 billion. The year before that, before COVID, was 41. And the only reason for the dip was because, everything is made in China, or a lot of things are made in China. And when China closed down, they simply couldn't get the stock. Consumers don't seem to be bothered by these things because IKEA is still delivering on its brand promise. Quality items at an affordable price. Last shag brand, Facebook. They've been changing their purpose quite a lot recently, trying to make it more ethereal, trying to evolve it. I'm sure most of you know now about the Cambridge Analytica scandal, about how they stole they shared, let's say, how many people's personal data with a firm that was using it for political marketing. There was some lashback, let's say. In the US, about 15 million consumers did end up dropping the platform. If you actually dive deep into it, it wasn't really because of privacy issue. It was more because it was slightly younger consumers switching to things like Snapchat and TikTok, or just not really finding anything to engage with the brand. The brand promise to them wasn't as strong. At the moment, Facebook still has 2.8 billion monthly users. About 1.8 billion people use the platform daily. So it seems we're all, again, quite content to share our every personal aspect of our lives, and it seems we don't really care if Facebook violates our privacy and gives our data to God knows who to use it and God knows how. So let's move on to our better quality brands, or better quality brand purposes. Who is it that we're looking for, that perfect one, that perfect marriage material? I know Apple gets used quite a lot, but there's a reason why it is the #1 brand, again, by revenue. Last year, I think they clocked in about $370 billion. That's versus Amazon, the #1 shag brand, at about $340 billion. So, you know, they're neck and neck. And you have to say that with a brand that, in this case, Apple, is all about empowering creatives. It's empowering, you know, this new think different idea. This, you know, it empowers people to do things in different ways and not be mainstream. Versus Amazon, which is just about getting you anything you want at any time. You know, they are neck and neck. They are quite close to each other. So maybe Amazon is approaching marriage material, maybe Apple is approaching shaggable material, but, you know, they are quite close to each other. They produce a limited amount of products, which are, again, meant to service this ethereal purpose, you know, this purpose of self-exploration and self-expression. And they do it in a consistent way. The brand promises, obviously, whatever we make is well designed, long lifespan for the most part. Okay, maybe not our phones, we use them too much. But, you know, they're there to be our life partners in very many ways and in very many categories. Tom's, I think you guys heard it mentioned by some of the previous speakers, even though, again, they're sort of pivoting or evolving a bit their brand purpose. This company was started by a gentleman, Blake Mikoski, who, through these efforts, through Tom's selling of shoes and supporting local communities, has touched the lives of over 100 million people around the world. He's not the president of the US or of China or of Russia, you know, big countries. He's not an IT guru to say that he launched a software which everyone has, like Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg. Just through the producing of shoes and selling them to, you know, a few million people a year, he's been able to change the lives of 100 million. He started with a cause. Producing shoes was the end result of that. He could have maybe done it through T-shirts, but maybe T-shirts wouldn't have been as good an idea. But the product was the end process of that idea, of that purpose. Tassos, if you can play my last example here for the
Every 30 seconds, almost 1,000 items of clothing are thrown away. Fight back with Eco Bio Laundry Liquid. It helps wash new life into old clothes because they're best in use and out of landfill. So let's wash wisely, wear longer, and waste less. This is Laundry Against Landfill.
Ευχαριστώ, Τάσο. This brand was started in the UK about 15, 20 years ago. Very small label. Again, the intent wasn't just to produce another fabric care, you know, laundry detergent, another Ariel, etc., another product in the space. It was very much to address a water usage and let's say product life cycle issue. And they found a way to do it by producing a product that when you wash your clothes, it doesn't take as much out of it. It cleans them, but it doesn't take as much out of them. It gives them hardy wear. It reinforces them so that these items don't end up being thrown out, put in landfills and all the rest. Again, starting from that purpose, you know, if you remember the chart, and working your way up, creating a team around it, creating a responsible organization around it, and then finding what the right brand promise, opportunity, and equity around that should be. So just to close out, let's look at some very, very quick examples of brands or products by brands that consumers are increasingly turning away from. In the US, you've probably heard by now, there are two legacy brands from the late 1800s, early 1900s. One is a maple syrup brand, Aunt Jemima. The other one is a rice brand, Uncle Ben's. These were created in, let's say, different times. And while the brand promises are valid in the sense of, yes, you know, one makes a pretty decent maple syrup and the other one makes, you know, pretty decent rice, the environment within they work in, the social environment, the political environment, the ethical environment has changed around them, and they've not changed until now. So in their current existence, these brands are literally going to be taken off the shelves. They might be rebranded as something else. We don't know quite yet. But in their current form, they're just not something that consumers can bring themselves to engage with, because the equity is all wrong. It's just mismatched. It's incongruent with what their expectations are. If we go into a very different sector, banking sector, we have HSBC. I'm sure many of you back in the days when we used to travel saw lots of these adverts, you know, in the airplane gangway tunnels before you boarded your flights. Very nice, quirky, very interesting, juxtapositions of ideas. And, going back to what their purpose is, which is about bringing ideas together, bringing people together, nurturing people. It's all very well on brand, and the brand promise seems to be there, and the equity seems to be there. Well, in the last 8 years, they've lost about 23% of their consumers. Again, for those of you who maybe are Netflix addicts like I've become thanks to this confinement, you might think it's because of all these very, very big fines that HSBC has been getting, these investigations. It was revealed that they launder money for Mexican drug lords and European gun runners and child slavery, all kinds of things, awful things against humanity. Definitely not something that promotes harmony and idea sharing with humans. The actual reason consumers are leaving them, it's because their brand promise of quality, of service quality, which is, you're a bank, you need to provide certain services. It's been going down through the toilet. Within the UK, while most banks, have a nice 70-80% ranking in terms of customer service quality, HSBC is at a 58 and dropping. They are closing hundreds of branches globally, under the whole guise of digital transformation and cutting costs and all the rest of it. But they're making contact with them, which is something that their average consumer needs, very, very difficult. And even if you can get them on the phone, or can get them through an email, or can get them through a web chat, your problems just aren't solved. If anything, more problems are created. So they're losing consumers, they're on their way out. Not tomorrow, not the next year, but this is definitely the trajectory for this bank candidate. I'm sure some of you might have heard, especially any of you working duty-free, there was a Toblerone, which is owned by Mondelez, again, by trying to manipulate a bit its brand promise, still delivering chocolate, and we've heard about chocolate today. They tried to do a very, very clear cost-cutting exercise. The traditional Toblerone chocolate all of a sudden looked like, it was missing teeth. They changed it. There was a huge consumer backlash. Toblerone was boycotted in several countries for several months. In the end, Toblerone sort of did a backpedal pitch and said, okay, we'll release the original chocolate, but we'll sort of reduce its size, or we'll offer the new chocolate at a better price and the compact chocolate at a much worse value price. These types of ideas should never have gotten off the ground. If you have your brand purpose, your brand promise and your equity there's no reason to touch it and manipulate it. This year announced that they're going finally after the vegan community. Vegans have been around officially at least for 15-20 years. KitKat finally decided to add its 250th SKU by launching a vegan brand, a vegan SKU, I should say. Again, they're treating a cause. Veganism is a cause. If you become a vegan, I think we even heard. I was at Thomas this morning, who sort of said he's gone a bit more vegetarian, vegan. It's a very serious decision to make, and it has a very serious impact on your life. It's not a flavor for a brand to take advantage of, for a product to be taken advantage of. You can buy chocolate, milk chocolate, this, that, or whatever. Oh, no, here's your vegan option. Not to mention, of course, if Nestle, who's the producer of KitKat, was very serious about this, is this going to be a product that is in the same box as your normal milk or dark chocolate KitKat? I mean, when you go to the store, how many KitKat variants do you ever see? 2, 3? Is this going to be one of the 2 or 3, or is this going to be launched in some obscure drugstore type pharmacy, for anyone who manages to find it? I think I'm closing out with Harley Davidson. Now, you wouldn't know that this is a Harley Davidson motorcycle just from the looks of it. It's their first electric Harley Davidson motorcycle. Again, we're trying to go into the area of, sustainable and, electric vehicles and all the rest of it. We want to reduce carbon footprints. They are ignoring their eternal brand promise to why consumers buy them, which is to have a real motorcycle with that real, RPM sound, to get places and to show off that I'm a certain type of person with a certain attitude, with whatever. When you get on the Harley Davidson electric bike and the only sound anyone hears is just click, that immediately destroys the equity of the brand, and it destroys your equity, because any real biker, whether they're Harley or not, who looks at you will be like, okay, what is it? I mean, just go get a Vespa. Why spend so much money on electric Harley if you can just buy a simple Vespa? So I've given you probably a lot to think of. I want to help you find a way through this mess, because it is a mess. And we're going to do this very quickly together before we run out of time. I just want to remind you of a few quick things. So as I said at the beginning, we have brands and we have purpose. The brand purpose will always be a commercial one: to make more money, sell more goods, connect with more customers, increase the basket size. That is what brand purpose is. There's social purpose, which are cause linked. Now, and sometimes companies will, they'll try and find some of these causes and get quite addicted to them and say, okay, thing left, right, we will be able to tie it all together. But you really need to create fundamental grassroots change if you want to be that type of cause-linked, fix-the-problem type of organization. Ben & Jerry's, just as a quick example, you've probably seen over the years, they have lots of different causes that they interact with, whether it's climate change, whether it's refugees. Last year in the US with the whole Black Lives Matter movement, they got on board and they even launched products to support it. They want to do something in the cause space, but they're probably doing so much that as a consumer, would it really make a difference? Would you want to buy Ben & Jerry's more or less? Yeah, maybe there's a special edition and you actually want to try the flavor, or you just like the packaging, but it's not an incentive to turn it into a more, or rather I should say, a less transactional type of brand. So you guys need a plan, and there's a very simple purchase decision tree to make you through it. Do you want something more is the first question, because as I said, you don't have to do it. You can be Amazon. Just deliver on the purpose perfectly.
Ευγένεια, θα πρέπει να σου ζητήσω να συντομεύσουμε λίγο, γιατί ήδη έχουμε φάει πολύ περισσότερο χρόνο από ότι είχαμε... Εντάξει, μπορείς να έχεις ένα λεπτό ακόμα. Okay.
So, do you want to do something more? No, that's fine. Just make sure you deliver wholly and ethically on your promise. Otherwise, you'll very quickly be moved into the kill pile. If you do want to do something more, do you want a Band-Aid? Do you just want to do something that's more PR-based, or like Ben & Jerry's, something that's maybe a bit more seasonal? Okay, we're trying to find something, fine. But that's not the strategy forward. At some point, consumers will call you up on it. If you do want to do something more, and you're willing to make a true fundamental change to your brand, to your organization, to your structure, then you need to sit down with your team. You need to find out what that vision is, whether it's a fix the problem vision, whether it's a fixing an inequality or a gap vision, and you will have to make systemic changes from the inside out. It's not just a new vegan flavor. It's not just a new packaging. It's not just some good PR, you were shown British Petroleum saying, okay, we have a way forward, but we're still going to make gas and fuel. But whatever you do it in a congruent way. And if you want to do more, you have to be ready to change a lot. So since chocolate has been the theme of this conference, it seems, I'll finish with one last quote, which is, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And in real life, in the real dating world, that is true. You have to go out, you have to put yourself out there, you have to meet people and find out what's there. But that doesn't have to be true from the brand world. It doesn't have to be true from the marketing and product and services point of view, because we can control what we want to be. And a consumer should never, ever think of us as a surprise. They should know exactly what we stand for. So with that, thank you very much for listening. I hope the case studies and other examples have inspired you. And if you have any questions, I'm here all day. Thank you.